This is RTE Radio 1. It's 10 o'clock, and now from RTE News and Current Affairs, The Late Debate.
Hello and welcome to The Late Debate with me, Audrey Carville. Coming up, life and death issues, the right to choose when and how you die.
I would like the choice to be able to do it my way, to die in the arms of my family and Tom.
59-year-old Marie Fleming is dying from multiple sclerosis. She may have only 2 years of life left. In January, she told the High Court that she struggles with severe and sometimes unbearable pain, barely managed by medication, which leaves her with distressing side effects. She said she needs the help of 7 carers. Her doctor said her mind and forceful clarity are all she has left. She wants the right to decide when and how she dies, and she wants her partner of nearly 20 years, Tom Curran, to help her to do it without fear of prosecution for killing her. Her case was built on the premise that the law discriminated against her because she was disabled, that an able-bodied person could take their own life. But the Supreme Court ruled yesterday that there was no right to die enshrined in the Constitution, nor was there any right to assisted suicide. Marie wasn't there to hear the judgment yesterday because she's suffering from a chest infection at the moment. Well, last September, Marie and her partner Tom were interviewed for RTE's Moment of Truth programme. The interview was broadcast back in January. Here's Marie talking about wanting to die a dignified death.
I would like the choice. I would like the choice to be able to do it my way, which is not dramatic. It is to die in the arms of my family and Tom.
Marie, while physically her body has been ravaged by the MS, her brain is perfect. She made the decision herself that if her MS got to the point that she didn't want to tolerate it, that she would want to end her life, that would be her way of getting away from the awful condition that she has. And my choice then was to help her do that. But I had no idea what the consequences were, particularly the legal consequences.
Well, Tom Curran went on to say that when Marie asks him to help her take her life, he will know what to do.
I won't go into detail in what it involves, but all that I can say is that it would be very foolish of us to go this far if we didn't have a plan. The first thing that we would need to do to give us both reassurance that Marie could have a painless and peaceful death is to put in place a plan. Now, by putting in place that plan, I have definitely broken the law.
And he believes that anyone who is in pain and suffering like Marie should have the right to decide when they die.
But why should it not be easy for people who have realised that the pain and the suffering of a particular disease and the indignity that brings with it is just too much for them? Why should they not have the right to say, I've had enough of this life, I want to go?
Well, joining me now in studio are Michael Nugent, co-chairman of Right to Die Ireland, and Dr. Regina McQuillan from the Irish Association of Palliative Care. You're both very welcome indeed. Dr. McQuillan, I'll start with you on that last point by Tom Curran. Why shouldn't his partner, Marie Fleming, have the right to decide when she dies?
I can understand his concern. I can also understand Marie Fleming's concern as well about how her condition is and what she would wish for the future. One of the things that's been commented on by the judges in the High Court is how obviously clear thinking and how determined the lady herself is. I can see there's a great difficulty that they suffer. But I am also aware that I would deal with very many patients who are in a more vulnerable position. So although they may be clear thinking, maybe they're not as strong in personality. And I would be concerned that vulnerable people would be under threat by a law that says it is okay to help somebody to die if they have severe disability or if they're terminally ill. Because I think a law that says that changes the nature of the society that we live in. It changes the nature of how we view people with severe illness, severe disability. And my concern is that I think it's very hard to protect all people in these sort of situations. So Mr. Curran is very clear in those clips that you played that he would feel that Marie should have this right. But I have a concern myself in a broader setting about the change this would mean to our society. I think that in the High Court, the judges would have said that they weighed up the evidence, and they felt that the evidence was such that although you may have some individuals who are suffering, it is for the greater good of more people. It is not right to change the law, and they also would feel that there was no sort of right within the Constitution that the law should be changed. So they're the sort of concerns I have, and I think it's about the sort of the wider societal concern, societal good.
Michael Nugent, on that point, because that is the concern from Dr. McQuillan, as she said, and many, many others as well, that legislators would not be able to fine-tune a law that would serve the needs of Marie Fleming and her family, but not other people as well, other more vulnerable people.
Well, I don't think that concern is valid. I mean, I think it's not beyond the capacity of intelligent, compassionate, ethical people to work out a balance that finds the best balance you can. There are conflicting rights and interests involved. I think it will change the nature of society, but it will change it for the good. It will say to these terminally ill people, we respect your dignity as a person. We respect your choice in terms of your future. And while whatever legislation you have in place, there will be people who may feel pressured to do something that they don't want to do. You've got to try and minimise that by safeguards. But at the moment, there are people who feel more than pressured to stay alive and go through suffering that they don't want to. In fact, they're legally obliged to do so.
Dr. McQuillan.
I think at the moment that the law allows that people they have a natural death. People are not obliged to continue treatment. They're not obliged to continue futile treatment. But the law at the moment does not allow that people can have assistance in their death and dying. I think that's one of the things that's really important, though, is to realise it's considered both legal and ethically appropriate that patients can refuse treatment that they do not wish to have, even if that refusal treatment would shorten their lives. Those are the things that I would be most concerned about, is that sometimes it can be seen as an extreme that people are forced to have treatment that they do not wish to have. That is not the case. So people can refuse to have treatment. That may not satisfy the wishes of all people, and if somebody is living with an illness, and it's not that the illness at itself at the moment is bringing about the death, but they wish somebody to give assistance, the law is not being changed in that light.
And if someone does refuse a treatment, are you talking about here a do not resuscitate order, for example?
Yeah, I think it's any sort of treatment. So patients can refuse any treatment so long as they understand the consequences of the refusal of treatment.
And you respect that?
Absolutely respect that.
So what's the difference here? Marie Fleming has decided that she no longer wants to live.
Yeah. The big difference is there's a difference between stopping a natural process and causing an unnatural event by bringing about somebody's death. So if somebody has an illness from which they may die, but a treatment may prolong their life, they can refuse to have that treatment. So I think there's a very big difference between allowing a natural death and causing something to happen. Michael Nugent.
Well, you see, I have difficulty with these kind of almost ideological, semi-theological distinctions of causing something natural and not causing something natural. The reality is that if you're terminally ill and you're undergoing suffering and you know that you're going to die, and it's not a question of whether you're going to die, it's a question of how you die, whether you die painfully or painlessly, and whether you die in a manner of your own choosing. Most, well, not most, I won't say most, but terminally ill people who are of sound mind and who have made their own decision on that, they will make their own ethical decision based on their own conscience, not based on the ethical priorities of other people. And ultimately, the law will have to catch up with that reality. The Supreme Court didn't say that it is wrong to allow assisted suicide. It said that it is up to the legislature to decide how to deal with it and to balance the competing rights. It said it couldn't find a right enshrined in the Constitution, but that doesn't mean that the legislature can't legislate for it.
But people involved in palliative care, like Dr. McQuillan, will argue that Marie Fleming and others who are terminally ill, they don't have to be in pain. That's where palliative care comes in and can make their final months or years peaceful. Yes, and if somebody wants to have palliative care, they should have that right, and they should have all of the medical resources that the state can afford to give them to ensure that they have the highest possible quality of life and highest possible quality of medical care, if that is what they choose.
However, if they choose something else, and if they choose that they would rather not go through that, then that should be their conscience that dictates what happens. And in those cases, their right should be respected for sound-minded, rational, terminally or seriously ill people to make a choice as to how they end their own life with dignity, and that choice should be respected.
Dr. McQuillan.
I think one of the things really important is the use of the word dignity, and I think a very important part of what I do as working in palliative care is about respecting patients' dignity and trying to ensure that people who are coming to the end of life have a dignified death. And there's a whole range of things that are involved in that. Some of those things are about symptom management, about comfort measures. Some of those things are about the level of basic care that people would need. Some of those things are about the place where people die, whether they wish to die at home or in hospital or in a hospice. I think one of the great difficulties we have in Ireland at the moment is that we can't offer this to everybody who needs it. And I think that we need to be sort of focusing on trying to improve this for all those people who need this, rather than saying that maybe a solution for some situations will be assisted death or assisted dying. I'm aware that in the past Marie Fleming has said that she has had palliative care and has not been of benefit to her. I'm not claiming that palliative care will solve all problems, but I do think if we had better health care in the country, better palliative care, better disability care, I think we then have less people who feel that they are suffering and less people who feel that they are a burden to themselves, to their family or to the state. And I think it's important that we just recognise that people who have severe illness, severe disability, they need more support and they need more help. And they're the sort of things I think that we really need to be focusing on. I think we need to be trying to focus and develop this, because I think it's important that people should be able to live with dignity and die with dignity and die surrounded by the people that they love.
Michael.
Yeah, you see, like that's fine if that's what people want. But if you talk to people who are dying and who have chosen a different choice, that they want to have the option to end their own life on their own terms, then they will see what you are saying as patronising in the extreme. They will see that as you saying, well, you can have this, that and the other in terms of dignity as long as you come to my conclusion. But you can't come to your own conclusion and you can't have dignity based on your own choices. And ultimately, dignity comes down to personal autonomy and personal conscience rather than being told what to do. And I agree with you, there should be that palliative care. There should be better resources for those who want it. But they're not mutually exclusive. You can identify who wants palliative care and give it to them, and identify who wants a different option and respect that choice for them.
My concern that if you allow a change in the law, if you allow that people can have assisted suicide or euthanasia, I think you do fundamentally change society, and I would think for the worse, not for the better.
Well, this is our difference then, because I think it's for the better. And I think it's happening anyway. Changing the law doesn't change what's happening. Changing the law, it's like the law for suicide itself. When suicide was illegal, it wasn't that nobody was committing suicide. It was just that people who were committing suicide were under additional stress and unable to talk to people about it because it was something illegal that they were planning. And it's the same with this. What it will do is people who do feel that they want to end their lives will be able to talk about it more openly, will be able to discuss it more rationally, and will be able to get advice. And who knows, may decide to change their mind. But it's a change. It's a change for compassion. It's a change for greater sort of empathy and respect for individual conscience, which is ultimately what it comes down to.
I suppose one of the things I have dealt with in my own personal career in working in palliative care is I've met some people who have wanted to end their lives. But sometimes then when you try and talk through them, what is it that they want, what is it that they need, most of these people have actually changed their mind. I have unfortunately met more often families who wishes that the patient's life was over rather than the patient. And they, again, is trying to see what is it that's driving the family's concerns in those sort of situations. I think that Michael and I might fundamentally disagree about what it is the right thing to do. I think is one of the things I think we need to recognise, that there are differences, and in different parts of the world sometimes there's different legislation. I think the majority in most courts where this has been tested have not been ruled in favour of assisted dying or assisted suicide or euthanasia. And I think those are the sort of things I think that are really important from my point of view, is that we are all individuals as part of a society. We do not live independently. We're not somebody who can serve. We're not, in the words of John Donne, no man is an island entire of itself. We're all part of the main. And also said, like any man's death diminishes me, for I am part of mankind. That's part of that whole idea about what John Donne is saying, is that we are part of a community, part of a society, part of a world living together. And we have an interdependency, which I think is really a part of this. So yes, there is this idea that you have the autonomy and the absolute right to that maybe people may wish to be able to exercise. But I think in reality, all through our lives, we all have this interdependency. And some of our responsibility is to ourselves. We also have responsibility to our friends or to our families. But I think we also have a wider responsibility as individuals to society as well. And that we need to be engaging in the world in such a way that we're protecting all members of society.
Mike?
Well, can I add another dimension into this conversation, which is that it's not merely about dying and the act of dying. My wife died of terminal cancer, and she had made preparations to take her own life if she needed to. And what was significant to her was not the act of dying. She wasn't worried about dying. She wasn't in any way afraid of dying. She didn't want to go through unnecessary suffering before she died, but she wasn't afraid of dying or anything after death. But once she had made preparations to be able to take her own life if she needed, and I was going to help her if she did need that help, her quality of life absolutely soared after that, because she was freed of the burden of the pressure of worrying about unnecessary suffering, and she had an extra year of quality of life that she wouldn't have had without that option. And the significant thing about it is that Anne in the end died naturally, and that is more common than people taking their own life. Most terminally ill people who take this decision do end up dying naturally. Most of them don't end up actually carrying it through, and it's because it is as much about the safety valve of knowing that you have the option to avoid the unnecessary suffering as it is about what actually happens at the end.
I would hope that people would be able to be aware they can avoid unnecessary suffering, and avoid, I'd hope, most unnecessary suffering by the good intervention of good healthcare, particularly good palliative care. That's where I think a lot of our focus is. Michael speaks there very clearly about his wife Anne and what her wishes were and what he was going to do for her. And it didn't come to that. And I think I agree with him. What he says is that in those parts of the world, that many people who take the option of seeking assisted suicide don't actually go through with that. But I still think that it is, for me, a concern that we would move the focus away from what we should be doing in relation to providing better support, better healthcare. And also think better education and understanding for the general population about healthcare, about the limits of healthcare, about the options for treatment, about what can be done to improve suffering, what can be done to relieve burdens and relieve stress.
Well, do you think it was wrong to decriminalise suicide?
I think decriminalising suicide, I think, is a very different, and I suppose I'm not an expert on either suicide or the legislation at the time. So I suppose my understanding really is my knowledge in relation to palliative care. So I think it's in a different setting.
But in principle, it changed the nature and the way that you're talking about that. Before, suicide was illegal, and that sent a certain message. Suicide was decriminalised in order to send the message that you can talk about it. You don't have to worry about being criminalised. But it would also have sent the same message that you're concerned about assisted suicide. And I don't really see that decriminalising suicide has changed society for the worse. In fact, I think it has changed society for the better.
I do, I know from reading some things in relation to decriminalisation of suicide in the UK rather than in Ireland, some of that was the idea to try and, not that you're actually saying the suicide was right, but decriminalising suicide is to relieve some of the stress and some of the burden. So I think the issue about whether something is decriminalised or not is you're actually saying, is it the right thing to do?
Yeah, so would that form a potential solution here then, that you could decriminalise it without sending a message that it's right, just that it is something that isn't, you're not going to get put into jail for?
Yeah. Personally, I think that the decriminalisation of suicide was about trying to relieve the stress for the individuals. I think it's not about saying that the suicide is right. I think if you're allowing that you would decriminalise assisted suicide, I think then you're sort of opening the door to this idea that helping people to die is right. And I do not believe that helping people to die is right.
Yeah, but you don't believe that suicide is right either?
I'm sorry, I've lost the...
That you don't believe suicide is right, yet you're okay with suicide being decriminalised.
Yeah.
There's a distinction between what we each personally believe is right and what the law should impose on people against their own individual conscience.
And I think that's one of the things about living in a society and living in a democracy, is that there are laws, there exist. Some of them are for protection of the individual, some of them for protection of others, some of them are for the wider protection of society. I think that's where we need to be sort of considering that we're part of this wider society. So there are laws that people may not agree with, but sometimes laws are brought in for the protection of others. So an interesting thing is the laws about smoking in the workplace. The law about smoking in the workplace is not about the individual, it's about the protection of people in work. So we may disagree with the law, but it is about protection of others. So there are, and I think there are other bits of legislation which are putting about restrictions on the rights of an individual for the wider protection of other people, for the wider protection of society.
Regina, we've had a couple of texts in. One saying no state will dictate to me when or where I shall die. And another one says I'm a chronic pain sufferer and I know that very soon I will end this living hell. May I point out to you all that you cannot understand this issue until you are in awful pain and indignity. Breathing and eating is in no way living. What do you say to that?
I am very sorry to hear that woman is suffering so much. I think one of the things of benign chronic pain, I think, is a significant burden on health. I think is something that we need to be working to try and improve our knowledge and our expertise in the management of patients with benign chronic pain. I do think I feel very sorry for people who feel that they feel their life is not worth living. I think it is an interesting dilemma that we sometimes are, when we're talking about people committing suicide, there are, on some areas, particularly in relation to, say, PA to House and that, some of these charities who are trying to support people who are living with the ideas that they may commit suicide, and how that is considered such a bad thing in society in some ways. And then in other ways, then we're wondering, saying that it might be a better option than the current life that people would have.
Michael, another tweeter's going at it from the opposite perspective, and it relates to what Regina was saying at the start in terms of more vulnerable people being, sacrificed, I suppose, in a way. And this person says the future of euthanasia, a solution to financial problems to do with the elderly. I mean, there is a concern that elderly people and more vulnerable people will face abuse as a result of any change in the law.
Well, there's a big distinction between euthanasia and assisted suicide. Euthanasia, somebody else is killing a different person. Assisted suicide, the individual is choosing to die themselves, is taking the action to die themselves, and they're being assisted by somebody else to do whatever physically has to be done. So what we're talking about in Right to Die Ireland is the right of terminally or seriously ill people who are of sound mind and who have rationally decided that they want to have the option to assisted dying. That's what we're talking about. And I think it is quite possible to put in place safeguards to minimise whatever risks happen. You can't exclude all risks in any circumstance. And what we're saying is you have to try and balance the different rights involved. At the moment, there is no balance. The people who want to die are being told, no, you simply have to go through this unnecessary suffering in case somebody else chooses to do something else.
Have there been cases in this country of assisted suicide?
There is an organisation called Exit International, which provides people with information as to how to peacefully and reliably die. Because if people are planning to commit suicide, the absolute worst thing that can happen is that they do it in a way that's painful, or that they do it in a way that's unreliable and end up, not dead within a coma or whatever. That organisation exists. It has somewhere between 100 and 200 members who are preparing to take their own lives when they need to. And there are other cases. There's a case where a woman was prevented from leaving the country, but her friend was leaving the country with her to go to Switzerland, and they were told that if the two of you go and only one of you comes back, you could be charged with assisted suicide. So she ended up not going, and she ended up dying herself in Ireland. And there are cases currently before in the DPP's office where they're deciding whether they're going to prosecute. And I think, unfortunately, in Ireland, these sort of things tend to take high-profile case to happen before the compassionate nature of the society kicks in and says, no, look, we've really got to deal with this.
Regina, just picking up on something that Michael said there about, people dying a painful death whilst trying to end their own life. And somebody made the point today, that 10 men were given the right to die on hunger strike in the Maze. 100 men have the right to die on hunger strike in Guantanamo Bay. Does Marie Fleming have to starve herself to death in order to get her rights? Surely her deciding how she dies with the love and support of her family, a humane and compassionate way of dying, is preferable to her refusing food and her last weeks being very painful.
I think that Marie Fleming's case, and like any of these cases, are all very difficult cases. I think there's no way around that. I think it's a very, very difficult situation that she is in. She wishes to have a particular thing which the Supreme Court or the High Court will feel that she does not have a right to. I think that it's a very different situation about political prisoners and people making choices about hunger strike or thirst strikes. I think it's very interesting. In Guantanamo Bay, quite a number of the people on hunger strike have been force fed. So they may or may not have a right to go on hunger strike. But unfortunately, which didn't happen in Northern Ireland, they are actually been force fed. But I do think I don't want to equate people living with serious illness to people making political statements on political prisoners. But there are, I think, the underlying concerns that I would have is that we change the focus on what it is we wish to do for people who are ill, or who are disabled, or who are suffering. I think what we really need to be working on improving the lives of people in this situation, improving the lives of their families. That's where I think we need to have the focus. My concern about not having that focus is that we'd end up then not feeling that this is something that is worth researching, this is something worth educating people about, this is worth investment in. That we move away from the really important thing that we need to be trying to improve the situation for people living in these very difficult situations.
Michael, just finally, because you're a good friend of Marie Fleming and Tom Curran, how are they at the moment?
Well, they're obviously disappointed. I mean, they expected the court result to go against them. They're taking a bit of time out to figure out what they're going to do. Ultimately, they will do what they have planned to do. And this is the point I was making earlier on. When you're terminally ill, you act on the basis of your own ethical conscience and not on the basis of what the courts are telling you to do. So I think that it'll take them a bit of a while to just recover emotionally from the court case but they'll get through it. They're a strong couple and they've a good family around them, and whatever happens, Marie will know that she has played a significant role in what I think will ultimately be changing the law for the better.
Well, we leave the last word on this to Marie Fleming. Here she is last September, paying tribute to the love and the care shown by her partner, Tom.
Tom looks after everything. He is the reason I live. He can read me like a book, and he brings so much to my life. I will never be able to thank him.